Hi, Chhavi. Thank you so much for doing this. We've been wanting to restart the podcast series, and it's great to have you on the first episode of the new season, if we can call it that. Of course, we've had a couple of chats in the past. You are now heading the IIMA Endowment Fund, and would love to hear from you how you would describe yourself to everybody else who's watching.
Thank you so much, Garima, for doing this. And I actually have seen a few of the podcasts from the earlier avatar. So I really appreciate all the passion that you bring to the table in terms of just steering this important activity, I think, for the SIG. Really hoping that this also renews, the series, and there's much more appetite for people who come and have a conversation with you. But in terms of describing myself, look, right now, since I'm back on campus, I feel more of a student than anything else. So I think life has come a full circle. As you know, I'm PGP 2004. And now last year is when I shifted back on campus to take on this role of CEO of the IIMA Endowment Fund. And the learning curve again has been immensely steep. So I think I owed it to IIMA to come back and renew this, because I'm not sure. By the way, I have this feeling that when I was a student here, I'm not sure if I gave it my all or I gave it my best. I was the one who was also trying to balance studies with doing theater with IMAX. I was also, the first time away from home. So I was basically a day scholar before this. I was at LSR in Delhi. And so I'm really not sure if I understood the nuances of being away from home, of actually being in a hostel. So there's a lot to adapt, right? Fresh off the bat.
Awesome. So you're getting a second shot at it. Not everybody does. So that's amazing.
Exactly. And I'm so grateful for it. And it's a very different vibe, because incidentally, as part of my work, I also deal now a lot with, frankly, the profs in a different capacity. And they're the same guys who've taught me. So the current director, the current dean, Professor Rakesh Basan, they're all literally three people who taught me. And now I get to deal with them because they're also on the board of the endowment fund in very different capacities.
That's amazing. There must be a surreal experience to be able to come back and do that.
Yeah, it took a while to adjust. And then, of course, then to be back on campus and just kind of at least walk around an old campus, so many memories associated with it. It's absolutely wonderful.
Great. Cool. So jumping right in, you started off your career in financial services, right? And now you moved on to now leading, of course, the IIMA Endowment Fund. What drives you to do what you're doing?
So I think that changes a little bit, right? There are different things depending on which stage of life you are in terms of what drives you. But I think the fundamental theme, which has sort of been a mainstay for me, is I need constant excitement in life. So, if things are going very stable, and even if they're going very well, I think I'll find a way to reinvent myself or do something. So it's been an interesting professional journey. So as you said, investment banking because incidentally, I grew up on the JNU campus. Okay, so I come from a Brahmin family in Delhi. Everybody was from the academic world. I read economics with LSR. My parents' greatest aspiration for me was that, Chhavi, please go on to teach economics. And when I was evaluating my postgrad options, other than the management schools, I also had a chance to read economics further with Oxford, Cambridge, and some of the other schools. And I was like, maybe it's okay to think about earning money, right? And this to my family was like, you're the black sheep, like you're a sellout. Okay. Why are you motivated by this? And we've come from a rich lineage of profs and teachers and so on and so forth. So in the very early days in the 20s, it really was that. It was hunger to understand what's the corporate world. It was very different. It was also a slight rebellious streak in me to do something different as compared to, what my family had done. And it was also motivated by, financial independence, which is important in the 20s, I think, to many of us. I come from a very middle class background in that sense. And so I was grateful enough that in IIMA, I could do well in finance. We all know that, it's not everybody's cup of tea. And then in our case, we had like 70-80% engineers, right, who are very good at quant and very good at all of this stuff. So it was interesting. And then investment banking, because in those days, that was frankly, the best profile of jobs you could get in finance.
Yeah.
So very blessed that happened. And also, I think then the investment banking journey stayed with me for about 10 to 12 years. And I did, again, change organizations in the middle. And that's more driven by the fact that the industry was changing course. So when the Lehman crisis happened in 2008, it was a different vibe. And then people understood, for example, that you'll have to work with banking platforms. You need balance sheet. So, in that case, I ended up working with Standard Chartered eventually, which at that time was the largest balance sheet in the business. I was lucky enough to join Kotak, which is still probably one of the best places to work, I think, in financial services. They were the only people who were hiring for investment banking, in my year. And then from there, I transitioned to UBS in the middle. And the reason for that was that, cross-border M&A is something I wanted to learn. So depending upon what skill I wanted to learn, what the industry was moving towards, I think those were some of the choices which drove mainstream financial services.
Awesome.
And now, why the endowment fund? So I think as you grow, and COVID, of course, has been quite instrumental in us just thinking about long-term priorities in life, right? So I think I realized that what motivates me now is just broadening impact. And what I'm very excited about is if I can play a small part in institution building, right? And the other exciting opportunity in all of this is that, not for profit space or organized philanthropy, and of course, even endowments. Like, we are the first significant business school to do this in the way that we have.
Right.
So there's an opportunity because it's so nascent today. And if you can be one of the founding members of it, then you're genuinely helping shape something quite path-breaking, hopefully, right?
Yeah.
And if I draw a parallel with what happens in India with global endowments, and they are like $40 billion of Harvard and, 20s of billions of dollars for the other large schools in the US. Closer home in Asia also, the endowments for National University of Singapore, etc., like $1.7 billion. So it's huge. And so India is like, we barely, sort of scratch the surface. Total philanthropic contributions, I'm happy to say, at IIMA are now, they've crossed 400 crores since.
That's amazing. Wow.
Yes. So, it's still a small drop in the ocean as compared to global schools, but is it becoming more significant? The answer is yes. So the challenge of that, the excitement of that, I think, is great. And just the last piece of why we are doing this is also because, I also, by the way, my husband is a batchmate. So he also graduated with me in 2004. I think we have a lot of gratitude to IIMA. Everything we've done in life is courtesy this, and it's just nice to come back and set something up here.
So you kind of landed up in the same place your family wanted you to land up in, but you found the best of both worlds: academic institution, but still working in a slightly more corporate role, I guess.
I think that's very well put, and it's frankly one of the questions which one of the board members of the endowment asked me when they were interviewing me for the position of CEO. Right? They're like, Chhavi, you're so used to mainstream financial services. How will you adapt? And I was like, boss, I grew up on JNU campus. Like, I spent 15 years of my life there. And I still, by the way, have a lot of friends in that ecosystem, therefore. So I think I completely understand how organic academic institutions are and how they do operate quite differently, frankly speaking, than a traditional corporate.
Yeah, and then you bring in that new energy to kind of just rustle things up. So I'm guessing that is also appreciated, that she understands, but will also change things up when required.
Yeah, and I think this is a very interesting point you're raising because, when I was going to take on this role, people were telling me, Chhavi, please change yourself a little bit, become a little more mellow, start wearing saris to work.
No, right. I mean, it's good if you want to, but like.
Yeah. And no, and this has nothing to that, I love saris, but it's not the way I've dressed in the past. I think so. It's like the point is, are you changing yourself or not? And I said, look, I've decided to be authentic. I've decided to be true to myself and true to the role. And everything I do will genuinely, hopefully, be something which is for long-term stability and creation of this endowment to support the institute. And I am so glad to tell you, Garima, that now, after about a year in the role, I found friends here. Friends are in the faculty, friends are in the staff, friends are in the students. And, one doesn't really need to change themselves too much, I think. It's just about having the right orientation and being true to yourself and true to the role.
Yeah, oh, that's amazing. That's really great to hear. Cool. So, I mean, we've touched a little bit about everything before IIMA and then after IIMA as well. But if you had to pinpoint, broad inflection points, maybe like the top 3 that really steered your journey, what would those be?
So the first one was very much getting into IIMA itself. That was a landmark event because even though I will say a good student before that, and I was doing very well in LSR, and we know that has a selection of very, very wonderful and, highly accomplished women. I think the filtration process of CAT and the confidence that gives you, that you basically belong with. And at that time, generally, I think the best were and hopefully are continuing to apply for this exam, right? So the filtration that gives you, the confidence that gives you, and then once you join IIMA, and you know this as a student as well, that people tell you that was joining or getting through was the easiest part, right? And hence making something out of it and doing well in it, obviously, it's one of the most rigorous curriculums. So the relentless pursuit of excellence, I think, which I may instill, is something which I've genuinely carried with me. And the reason for, therefore, doing multiple hats and, changing roles, changing organizations, trying to constantly learn, reinvent oneself. I think all of that fundamentally comes from this stability you have inside you, that it's okay, I can deal with it. And that innate, sort of sense of belief comes from the experiences here. The second thing which really changed me is a more personal thing. That is when my father passed away. And that was in 2011. And that's when I was, just dealing with doing quite well in banking. But, banking, of course, was also going through its own ups and downs. And then somewhere along the line, I realized that I would like to try to work for myself. So what I didn't explain is that between traditional investment banking as well as this role, I actually have a stint of entrepreneurship in between for a few years. And me and my husband basically started a venture together. It was in financial services and wealth and asset management. My role was more focused at that time on deal origination and asset gathering, which would have been fairly consistent with the kind of work I was used to seeing in my investment banking avatar. And hubby was supposed to take care of the investment side as an asset manager because that was true to his role. Within 6 to 8 months of us setting up this company, he got a job offer to lead a quant hedge fund. And that he loved, and he said, I can't say no to this. And he said, Chhavi, therefore you please run with the whole thing, right? So I was thrown right into the deep end there. Obviously, I had a lot of conviction about the overall space, and we were trying certain strategies, including fixed income and multi-asset, which were very, very new to the country, right? We were also young and naive. So frankly, in hindsight, would I have started with those? I don't know. But I didn't know enough about the space at that time. And I was clearly relying on someone else's experience to help me out.
Yeah. But that's the best way to do it as well, no? Like I think you need a little bit of naivety to kind of just like push through. Okay, I'll do it.
You absolutely do. And sometimes I think that conviction and that thing that it's okay, we'll deal with it. I'll deal with it as I learn as I go. I think that has always stood me through. And so happy to say that, then I adapted. Yeah. I learned the investing side. I learned how to structure like very traditional debt transactions, which I hadn't done before. I've looked at now the asset management side. We've had good returns in that business, raise funds for it, set up offices for it, hire teams for it, blah, blah, blah. So then that was so contrarian basically to me working with large bulge bracket investment banks, right? Very, very well-established behemoths, big brands. Most people in India will meet you because you're carrying that card of being from a Kotak or a UBS or a Standard Chartered. Here you are the brand, you know. So effectively, nobody really knows what is the company's name was is Science Capital. What is that, right? It's you, essentially. So a lot of life lessons in entrepreneurship. It's not smooth sailing, new skills to be built, optimism, dealing with failure, dealing with risk, resilience. I think a lot of those things is what I sort of learned. And then the third, which is not really an inflection point, but I will say that it's that realization through COVID. I briefly alluded to it in terms of why I'm doing the endowment role now. But I think I moved towards this is me wearing my economic student hat, so bear with me. But Pareto optimality is a concept. And so it's like, boss, it's good to earn money, but it's also good to have impact. It's also good to give back. It's also good to create institutions. It's also good to build legacies. It's also good to influence lives. It's also good to hire the right people, ideate, train them, inspire them. So I'm like trying to optimize too many things. And again, feeling very, very blessed that this role to a large extent fulfills this. It's such a high risk move, right? Doing something like this. But it's wonderful. And the more alums I talk to, the more they resonate and say that, this is being approached in a very fresh way, very professional way. The more I interact with faculty and, the institute side, they're like, boss, you bring a fresh energy, and thank you for alluding to that before.
Of course.
So that's where we are at. So achieve Pareto optimality. That is the mantra. And there's also fun, and there's also travel, and there's also some of those things which personally also motivate one. So those are also some other dimensions. So we are living in the multiverse since the movie has just come out.
No, absolutely. And I feel like you also need all of those, right? That's the only way you bring a fresh perspective as well. Unless you have like interests outside of what you're doing on a day-to-day basis, you don't really bring that change unless it is a different kind of, I don't know what to say, but sometimes how, like when you're cycling and there's like a stone that comes in and changes the path unexpectedly, but you kind of gain balance again. It's kind of like that, right? You need a little bit of a different flair in the same setting to kind of create that change as well. So I'm glad that's happening. I mean, I see it. And I'm sure many generations afterwards will also be thankful to you for this finally being started. So
Yeah, but it's honestly also thanks to, I mean, one needs to say it's really the vision of the guys who put in the initial
yep,
capital, right? That's a big one. And it's also
absolutely.
to the current institute stakeholders who, ensured that it's smoothly sort of carried forward,
Absolutely.
because it's very difficult structurally otherwise to achieve something like this.
Yeah.
So we've
Yeah.
just had great timing. And I keep saying that since our board generally at the endowment has representation from the alumni donors as well as from director, dean, and some of these people from the institute,
Huh.
it's genuinely a win-win. Yeah, you're trying to create something which is best of both the worlds, and if you
Right.
have that approach at the back of your mind, then yes, God willing, things do move ahead. Sometimes slowly, but surely.
Awesome. Looking forward to seeing more happen on that front. Now, coming to IIMA itself, we obviously spoke about your life on campus right now, but what are some of your fondest memories from campus? What do you look back to from that time? Like, what are your halls of nostalgia like when you're walking through the halls now?
So the one of the biggest ones is LKP. I have
Hmm.
had wonderful all-nighters at LKP with different types of friends, right? And these are just things like, and I'm the one who, as I said, and first year I was dealing with a lot and not just only studies. So the things which I used to talk about are very many. And I'm happy
Yeah.
to say that some of the best friendships I made, therefore, are in these all-night conversations. One
Right.
of them, of course, was with my hubby. And so some of the fondest memories. And I remember the night that, he and I decided that we're going to be best of friends, right?
Uh,
Because that was generally conversing about many, many, many things at IMA. So LKP is one. The second thing is यार वो group meeting करके एक हमारा night retreat होता था, right? And वो 3 बजे खत्म हुआ, you're hungry, and I am the spoiled brat who was a day scholar. All these people
right.
had, lots of them had lived in a hostel before,
Uh,
so I used to complain about the quality of food all the time, right? And so the night retreat ka Maggie at 3 a.m. was, the thing which you look forward to. Like you can study so much, and now the whole group is going to go and chill at the NR, and we didn't have options. Like today's kids have so many options here on
yeah.
campus, and I think more are going to come. So that elusive NR for sure. And
Mm.
then I again am someone who really wants to do something creative or something beyond work/studies. So
Mm.
I am APS, which was the Theatre Society of IIMA.
Yep.
I'm happy to say I did 7 plays and I'm in some
Wow,
capacity.
that's amazing. Nice.
Yeah. And second year, of course, it's easier to do. But even in the first year, in the first
Yeah.
term or second term, we were doing plays. And I was the only fachi used to show up for those auditions because everybody was busy mugging.
Yeah.
So very, very fond memories of the guy who ran IM Acts in the year before, which was
Yeah.
a senior,
Mm.
a tucha, as we used to call it. And
Yeah.
then, basically our batch. So that was super, super fun.
Yeah.
And then, just I think back runs from an academic. I used to do really well in them. So I used to get
Yeah.
amused at people running who couldn't deal
Yeah.
with it. So hysterical.
For us, we of course like just had online submissions, so we missed out on that run aspect of it. But I do remember us being conned into doing a whack run once just for the heck of it, just so that it was entertaining for everybody else. So it was, and then it becomes like but we can just send it on email. Why do I have to run to do this? So it's an added layer of confusion, but I think it's fun still.
Yeah, no, it's super fun. And so remember that we are many years ahead, like in the sense elder. And so we did not have the infrastructure you all did, yaar. Computer
Yeah.
तभी लगे थे. वो जो modem का speed होता था, dung, dung, remember the sound, like the tenuous sound. And so there was literally a guy. So, you can't print in D18. It's too far away, or some of the dorm which are very distant, you can't print there. So the guy will send it to his, friend in D4, which is closest to the submission area. The guy from D4 is printing page by page is, one different guy is running so that this one guy's report can be submitted in time. It was like the best, OM problem being solved live, if you know what I mean, with the limited resources and the limited this thing. And so, the lack of technology in a way was also helpful,
Yeah.
because the bonding which we had, therefore, because the ecosystem really relied a lot more on people, to be honest with you.
Correct. Yeah, it's more like a whack relay rather than a run.
It
Multiple people
often
helping out.
became, and log फिर वो tempo shout लगा रहे हैं, like it was a whole moment. And I don't know whether tempo shout, like I'm sad to say they don't really exist, because we came back for a 2019 reunion, a 15-year reunion, and we said हम तो जाके tempo shout लगाएंगे, and the students were looking at us like we were some aliens from I don't know where. And there were 70, 80 of us, so this was a big
Yeah.
crowd.
Yeah.
And they're like, who are these irritating people who've taken over our world? Like, what is happening? And we're like, you guys don't know. You guys don't dunk each other. You guys don't do tempo shouts. Like, that was all quite a mainstay for us. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Now coming back to after IIMA, when you kind of stepped out into the professional world, what was your experience like navigating that as a woman? Obviously, it's going to be a lot of things are going to be similar across genders. But did you see things differently, or did things happen differently to you? What was your experience like navigating that as a woman?
Yeah. So I will say that I've been blessed by many employers, I think, who are fairly equal opportunity in terms of how they conducted themselves.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, in investment banking, particularly, as we know, the ratios are quite heavily skewed. Right. And so in most of the meetings or boardroom discussions, would I be one or two of the women out of maybe 20? The answer is invariably yes.
Yes.
And so are there stereotypes, therefore, and before you open your mouth, will people judge you to be in a particular type of a role? Yes. So I faced that a lot, that sometimes people will just assume that you're the person who's there to minute the meeting, for example, right? Till you open your mouth. So some of those biases are there depending upon what kind of client you're dealing with, which part of the country, but within organizations, because again, was working with, well-defined institutions, most of them are very equal opportunity, as I said, in terms of employees. The atmosphere is very meritocratic. And I think this is something I really stand by, which is, look, I'm all for diversity. In the endowment team today, frankly, we have more women than men. That's how it's happened, right? But at the same time, it's because I felt that this person is best for this role.
Right.
And hence, having a meritocratic culture is what will gain respect. And we as women need to train ourselves to adapt to the roles we want to be in, such that we can stand equal with men. Because that's really what builds, I think, respect over long term and equality over long term. I don't want to be there just by virtue of being diverse. I'd love to be there if I think I can add value. That's my personal submission.
Correct. Yeah. Makes a lot of sense. That, of course, has to be why people get hired, not so diversity. I mean, you'd hate to be called a diversity hire also. Okay, I'm not just here for to put like a splash of color on the walls, but I am a participating member of the team.
Yeah. And then I think as a theme over a period of time, to get women there, because there is obviously, difference sometimes in terms of educational backgrounds, in terms of emotional perceptions, in terms of support which is needed, particularly for women who have children. Those are things which must structurally be solved for. And all employers today are obviously moving in that direction, right? It's not just frankly gender or inclusion, it's ESG overall, right? And social is a big part of that.
Yes.
So I'm very happy to say that the world has changed, but traditionally was there stereotyping, was there basically men perceiving you in a certain way? The answer is I have dealt with that in different points of time. The great thing is that I've never faced too much resistance once, I've spoken or I've had a chance to interact with the person.
No, I think, but it's also a factor of like you explained about when you were about to join IIMA back now as part of the endowment fund, there were certain perceptions in terms of people telling you that you should wear a sari or you should talk differently or do all of those things. I think at the crux of it also comes down to just being your true self, and of course part of it is the environment allowing you to do that, and part of it is just kind of the person themselves also being like, I don't care, I will fight through this and I will be who I am in the process as well, right? So it is a little bit of a mix of the two. But I'm guessing that also would have kind of propelled you into being that way in those situations as well.
Absolutely. And so I think touchwood, I've been very blessed with this. And I think some of it comes from just the way you are brought up as well. So I have to thank parents and that environment. Right. But the idea is I've been fairly authentic to myself, sometimes almost to a fault, right? Because the world forces you to adapt, and sometimes it's so easy to give in, yeah, Garima, right? It's so
Yeah.
easy to say that, okay, fine, yeah, I'll wear a sari if that means that, XYZ.
Yeah.
But I'm like, no, yeah, you have to hold on to yourself, and that matters. And the wonderful thing is that, again, if you're professional, if the attitude is correct, if you're anyway delivering on all counts, most people are able to see that. Most people are
Yeah.
fair and objective in that
Yeah.
sense. But having that innate sense of confidence, and that comes from education, it comes from the way your parents bring you up, it comes from ecosystem, it comes from continuously learning, adapting, reflecting on yourself. Because we are all insecure also fundamentally. We each have our own insecurity. And as women, to be in an alien environment relatively, that part I think can get something which is, we have to sort of deal with it periodically. So do I also have these phases where I'm like, boss, it would be so much easier to not be yourself? The answer is absolutely yes. But then you reflect and you learn and you adapt, and yeah.
I mean, the other thing is also I often think about this and the fact that even if you look at any higher education school in India, right? And IIMA obviously being one of them as well, the percentage of women is always lesser. But if you also dig deep, it also means that the percentage of women who are able to make it there are also anyway coming from a certain kind of privilege, right? Because families will be helping you kind of do this. You will have a certain environment in which you are able to do this as well. Economic prosperity, all of those things obviously play into it. And then to enter a workplace where again those things are kind of um, how do you say it? But you obviously come from a level of privilege as well to be able to actually use those strengths to your advantage as well. It's one of those things where it's very difficult to remember that there will be many people who actually won't be able to leverage those strengths. I think that's where the environment becomes important as well. Are you allowing for people who look differently than this type of person who has seemed to kind of made it into this small percentage of women in that space? That I personally don't have an answer to. I'm just saying that this is something that I think about quite often as well. I don't know if you've got thoughts on that, or how you kind of um, think about that aspect as well.
No, so you're absolutely right. And so environment is a huge, huge thing. And one of the biggest reasons, because again, coming from an academic background, what did I know about conducting myself in a corporate culture? And even, IIMA education, while it prepares you a lot in terms of cases to think through situations, you haven't been in that environment. Yeah, you haven't.
Right.
So you're pretty much learning from scratch. One of the things that really helped me is having great women bosses or women leaders to look up to. So in Kotak, Falguni used to be there, right? In UBS, the time that I joined, there was a lady called Manisha Girotra, and she was heading UBS at the time, right? So seeing some of these women who are doing really, really well, and how they were conducting themselves, and the fact that there was work-life balance, the fact that they were being authentic. Falguni's journey, of course, she was here as the latest chief guest at Convocation as well. Was again life coming full circle, because after Kotak days, I met her after a very, very long time on campus. But that's the thing. So it's like just constantly inspiring. And then if women are leaders also, then obviously they also help in creating organizations which support the ecosystem more. But I think solving for this in terms of either scholarships, either support, either training, either mentorship, structurally from, all of those things we do need to think through from building the environment's perspective.
No, but I do agree. I think that storytelling perspective is very, very important, right? I can speak from my personal example. I come from a family that actually, again, didn't have very much to do with the private sector, very like civil services, us type ka background. So I actually don't have women in my family who worked outside of just that government space. So for me also, this is a way for me to actually just get closer to people who are role models, right? People who kind of done that and kind of done it. And hopefully this is something that helps others who are watching as well. But yeah, I feel like that definitely is a big aspect of it, right? Being able to see people around you who are doing it. And then it's not a big deal, right? This is something you have to deal with. And you go ahead and kind of do it. Rather than feeling like, I don't know who to ask for help, and I don't know where to go, and I don't know how I would even possibly achieve this wild dream that I have. So yeah, I think that's that's a side note on because it also checks all the boxes on why we do this podcast as well. So
No,
Cool.
absolutely. But on a separate note, you and I should talk about independent initiatives of this, by the way,
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
at Endowment also we are supporting a lot of these causes. I'm doing a lot on the CSR side also now. So one of the ways is obviously raising money through alums, but a lot of our alums are well placed in corporates. CSR
Right.
is a big goal. Education, anyway, something which fits into the realm of this.
Hmm.
But supporting women programs, women training programs, women entrepreneurial training programs, scholarships for gender, etc., is also something which we do look at from the endowment side. So let's chat
Nice.
on that.
Yes, yes, yes. I think makes a lot of sense.
But I
Alright.
still really,
Yeah.
I just, the only thing I really want to sort of reiterate is that the meritocracy aspect still is
Absolutely.
extremely important.
No, no, absolutely. I think that goes without saying. Like whenever we talk about these structural changes, also everything, the idea is obviously it's not a handout, right? It has to be earned as well. You have to show a level of being able to do something with it, having that kind of caliber to be able to take it forward as well. But yeah, I mean, I think that's a little bit of the challenge as well, right? The perception of initiatives like this is in the whole charity space. Unfortunately, that's how it tends to be perceived. But I think the underlying principle has to definitely be that it is people who deserve it. Right. Ultimately, it has to come down to that. And how do you create more people who kind of deserve it? How do you structurally make that happen so that the pipeline is bigger? All of that is obviously a part of that problem that needs to be solved as well.
Exactly. So you took the words out of my mouth because the latter part is extremely important. And like deserve, it almost sounds a little judgmental, if you will, although I know where you're coming from.
Uh,
But the point I'm saying is that, even aptitude hai ya attitude hai.
correct,
But at
correct.
least the fact that agar ek opportunity hai, you want to make something of it.
Exactly.
It's not
Yeah.
just saying, okay, I'll only take the best marks or I'll only do this or I'll only do that or the top ranking person, because women
Yeah.
also bring a different perspective to workspace. And that is
Absolutely.
something which people do understand. There are theories, and you've read that research, for example, that asset managers have done so much better,
Yep.
because women fund managers have a different perspective in terms of assessing risk.
Yeah.
So all of those things are also technically true, but yeah, so attitude, aptitude, just the fact that you're using the opportunity for the best and not taking it for granted just because it's there.
Yep.
That I think is very important.
100%. I think that is, and that's the most difficult thing as well, right? How do you kind of solve for that on both ends? Create more people like that, and then also when you create more people, it's also going to become more difficult to also meet that or decide what that final criteria is going to be as well. So
Yeah.
glad it's you doing that job for the IIMA initiatives when we do kind of bring those into this as well.
And thanks again, Garima, because the storytelling part, as you said, I think is extremely important. People
Mm.
resonate the most with humans and human stories.
Mm.
For sure. Everything else otherwise is just so theoretical, right? We can argue about it, we can debate about it, policymakers talk about it, corporates have it in terms of their objectives, boards debate about it, all of which is wonderful. But I
Mm.
think the real thing is to create inspiration in people
Mm.
and to remove fear and to say that confidence is everything. I think if that attitude really can happen, I think that's when you're making it very, very sustainable.
Yeah, yeah, makes sense. Cool. To end this, what is the one piece of advice that you wish somebody had given you when you were starting your career off?
um I think it would be about valuing people more and the
Hmm.
softer courses more. So
Hmm.
again, because investment banking is very technical,
Hmm.
when I got in, one obviously came from finance. We can do this. Let's crack the deal. Let's get the models going. Let's get the multiples going, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
Right. I think as we were just talking about stories and how humans inspire humans, and this ability to sort of touch multiple people is what actually moves things forward sustainably. That's been my biggest learning.
Hmm.
In time, I've realized that everything is about people management at some level. All stakeholder management is effectively people management at some level.
Yeah.
And if you appreciate that from the first instance, you will do so much better.
Hmm.
And often, what helps me a lot is that I put myself in the other person's shoes quite often.
Hmm.
On every negotiation, on every discussion, and then where they're coming from. Sometimes if they sound irrational or they're sounding insecure, then if you put yourself in their shoes and you try to at least understand where they're coming from, you understand the logic of it, and then you're able to deal with it very differently. It
Yeah.
makes you more optimistic. It makes you more something which is looking at a win-win situation instead of just being in a conflicting point of view. um, And so stakeholder management is something which is a very underrated skill. But I think the more senior you grow and the more autonomous you grow, the more you're trying to do in terms of legacy building, institution building, it's probably the biggest and most important thing. And today in the world of social media, there's so much noise and there's so many opinions out there. So again, in that, I think even though you don't want to perhaps sometimes, but stakeholder management again, therefore is extremely important, and communications is a part of it.
Yeah.
So, I used to joke with people. I did very well, frankly, in some of these courses like OB and HR. And people used to keep me, Chhavi, so technicals maybe please kuch kar lo, which I did. But point is, these were the underrated courses at that time.
Right. Yeah.
But they genuinely are the ones which hold you in very good stead, in life.
Yeah.
It's professional as well as personal, both.
Agreed. I remember when we used to be doing our OB courses, all the professors used to have this smirk on their faces, right? Because people used to not take it seriously then. But they were like, okay, wait for like 5 years when you come back and ask me these questions about something you learned in some case. You're like, oh, they obviously know something. And then like 5 years later, you realize, oh, that's what they meant.
No, honestly. So funnily, one of our profs in that department, is currently one of the deans at IIMA, right? And he and I keep joking exactly about this, that the relevance of that was so lost on us. We're so, and when you haven't worked before, I think there's really no appreciation of it. It comes with experience.
Yep.
So I think that's been the biggest learning. Yeah, I wish somebody had told me that earlier, so that beyond just looking at things only from a numeric perspective, I would have thought about things a little more holistically. And secondly, there's a lot of credence given to IQ in traditional sort of academia, as well as in terms of how you benchmark success. But EQ is equally important. Yeah.
Yep.
It's something I've had to learn and train myself in. And I wasn't, I believe, as good at it 10 years ago or 15 years ago. In banking, one could look at things in a very myopic way. But yeah, all that I hope has changed and continues to change.
I'm sure. Thank you so much. I think this is definitely going to be very helpful to people as they go through your journey as well. Thanks so much for taking out the time to do this.
No, I really appreciate it, Garima. Thank you so much.